My best friend and her husband was in a car wreck 2 weeks ago. My best friend had no injuries, but her husband had injuries that made him slip into a coma. The whole 2 weeks her husband was in a coma, she stayed by his bedside and didn't leave. Well, one day I was at work and I received a phone call from my best friend. She sounded so happy. She told me that her husband finally woke up from his coma. She then asked me could I come to the hospital after I got off work. So that's exactly what I did. When I got off work, I headed straight to the hospital. When I got to the room, my best friend was still sitting by his bedside, and I just sat in a chair that was right next to the door. As she sat by him, he started talking to her. His eyes was full of tears. He said, "You know what? You have been with me all through the bad times. When I got fired, you were there to support me." I looked at my best friend and she had tears rolling down her face. Then her husband said, "When my business failed, you were there." He started rubbing his hand across her cheek. Then he said, "When I got shot, you were by my side. And when we lost the house, you stayed right there. But most importantly, when my health started failing, you were still by my side." At this point, I had tears rolling down my face. He grabbed her hand, and then he said, "You know what? I think you're bad luck." My little brother is always being teased by the other neighborhood boys for being stupid. Their favorite joke is to make my little brother choose between a nickel and a dime, and he always chooses the nickel. Well, one day I wanted to have a talk with my little brother, and I told him that those boys are making fun of him. I said, "Don't you know a dime is worth more than a nickel, even though the nickel's bigger?" My little brother just smiled at me. He said, "Well, if I took the dime, they'll just stop doing it." And so far, I made $30. So my grandfather was telling me this story of how he used to love to go fishing every Sunday. He got up every Sunday and made his own lunch. Then after that, he hooks up his boat and he would be gone all day long. Well, one Sunday morning, he got up early without waking up my grandmother. And after he got dressed and grabbed his lunch, he went to the garage to hook up his boat to the back of his truck. As he was pulling out of the garage, he noticed that it was pouring down rain. And it was very windy. The wind was blowing like 60 miles per hour. He didn't want to go fishing in the rain, so he decided to stay home. When he came back into the house, he turned on the weather channel just to make sure it wasn't going to rain all day. But the weatherman said they were going to have bad weather all day long. So my grandfather puts his boat back into the garage and then he slips into bed with my grandmother. That's when my grandfather whispered in her ear and told her that the weather was terrible. My grandmother started yawning. And then she said, "I know, but can you believe my stupid husband is out there fishing?"
One of my fat cousins was tired of being overweight, so he called me. He says, "Artie, can you please help me lose 5 pounds?" And of course, I agreed to help him. And the next day, I sent over one of these girls that I knew, and she was wearing nothing but running sneakers and a sign that says, "If you can catch me, you can have me." And without a second thought, he takes off running after her. But a few miles later, he just gives up. But when he weighed himself, he saw that he lost 5 pounds, so he was happy about it. He called me back. He says, "Artie, I need to lose 10 pounds. And of course, I said yes. So the next day, I sent over the prettiest, most gorgeous girl that I knew. And again, she was only wearing running sneakers and a sign that says, "If you can catch me, you can have me." But without giving it any thought, he started running after her, and I told her to tease him a little bit, so he kept chasing and chasing. This time, he ran like 8 miles. And eventually, he gives up because he realizes he can't catch her, but when he weighs himself, he sees that he lost 12 pounds, so he was happy. Then he calls me up, he's like, "Artie, I need to lose 15 pounds. And I'm like, "Whoa, buddy, are you sure about that? Because this plan will be the hardest one ever." And he said, "Absolutely." So I said, okay. The next day, I sent over this big, muscular guy, and all he was wearing was pink running shoes and a sign around his neck saying, "If I can catch you, I'ma have you." He lost 25 pounds that day.